Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the extract interface refactoring technique. This technique basically has you extract an interface off of an existing class that you'd like to test out and pull out all the methods and properties which you'd like to use on this new context. What makes this technique so great is it's about the safest dependency breaking technique there is, with virtually little room or chance for introducing a new bug. In this episode, we're going to be looking at how we can back in some tests into some legacy code, which was not designed with testability or the solid principles in mind. We would like to do this because I'd like to make changes to the underlying code, but before I want to make these changes, I'd like to ensure that my functionality works as expected, and then when I make my changes that I can rerun these tests to make sure I didn't break any existing functionality. The code we're looking at today is called Service Manager. This is a project that basically acts as a cron job where it will load plugins, and these plugins fire and run and do something every interval. And it basically finds them via reflection, loads them up, and does some fancy magic, and that's great. But I'd like to change some of the underlying functionality. Now the class that we want to test is actually the serviceloader.cs class. Serviceloader.cs has a method down here called change service status. Change service status basically will take in a existing service, and depending on if you want to start or stop it, will attempt to start or stop that service, and then report the status of it inside the service itself. And we'll set it either true or false. And this is the method that we would like to test out today. Now, let's go ahead and go to my service loader test fixture. I've already got this set up. In order to save some fat fingering, I'm going to paste in my test, and we'll walk through this here in a second. What this is, it's going to say change service status, which is my method under test, to stop, expecting to call stop, and ensure that when stop is called, it's left in a stop state. Now, in order to do this, I need to obviously create an instance of my service loader class. Service loader requires two parameters, two different delegates, and I've already stubbed those out up above. I don't really care about the implementation. Each of these delegates actually has a callback mechanism. I don't care about that. In order to call change service status, I actually need to provide it a service info class. So I'll go ahead and create an instance of that. And service info, you'll see, requires an instance of the service class. And this is where our problem begins. Now, what we're going to want to do is run this test now, just so I can demonstrate how not having our abstractions will not allow me to test in isolation. It will also not allow me to make changes in the future. So let's go ahead and run this test. So I'm going to F11 into this test, and I'm going to run to my breakpoint. And if I F11 into this now, you'll see that I actually step into the start and stop. That's not the appropriate behavior for my test, because I already have tests, ideally, that will test the starting and stopping of a service. I actually want to abstract that away, and that's where my interface is going to come in handy. Now, you'll notice that I have to pass in an instance of my iServiceInfo class, and iServiceInfo has a property now called service. That service correlates to this service here. So what I want to do is I actually want to change that from being a concrete implementation to an interface implementation. So I'm going to use ReSharper here, and I'm going to call extract interface. I'm going to use, set to use start, stop, and run. And I'm going to click next. Now when I do this, I get an error from ReSharper saying that the iService interface already exists. That actually exists from some legacy code. Ideally, I would want to go back and refactor that as well, but for the sake of this demo, we'll just leave this as is and rename it to iServiceInfo. So I've created my interface. What I want to do now is actually want my interface to inherit off of iAbstractService. iAbstractService is what this concrete class abstractService implements. And so now I'm going to want to go back to my test, go into service info, and change it from relying on the service concrete to now relying on the interface. Now that I've done this switch, let's go ahead and recompile this. Got an error here. iServiceInfo does not contain definition for get service configurator. Alright, so what we need to do now is go back to here. And I need to push this up into my interface. There it is. Let's recompile this. Okay, everything recompiled successfully now. Let's go back into my unit test. Now what I want to do is I want to replace this concrete implementation with a mock. Now for this we're actually going to go ahead and use Rhino mocks. So I'm going to create a stub on iServiceImpl. I'm going to swap this concrete implementation out with my service interface. Now, if I run my test now, because I've not set up any expectations on my mock, I will not get the expectations or the results I expect. So what we're going to want to do is come back up here and stub out our service. And I want to do x.stop. You'll see stop has two overloads. We want to use the one that takes two arguments. So we'll do arg. And we're going to have this return true. Now that I've done that, I could actually run my test, but let's go ahead and add an assert here. And so we are done with our unit test, and we can now run this. So F11 in this, I'm going to run to my breakpoint again. Now ideally I will step over this because this is a mock now. And I did. That's great. And you can see I'm going to set start equals to false because I did stop successfully and that's my status. And if I let this run out, you'll see that my unit test passed as expected. So in this short example, we've taken a look at how we can go into our service info class that was once implementing a concrete class, extract an interface from that concrete implementation called iServiceImpl, use or set up the appropriate methods or properties, change my concrete to now implement that interface. And then in my unit test, I can create a mock which allows me to remove or abstract away that component so I can test in more isolation. And then I can use my mocking framework. I can set up an expectation here, which allows me to test and my test to run successfully. Now, of course, you don't have to use Rhino mocks here. You can use any mocking framework, or for that reality, you can actually use a manual mocking technique as well. So I hope you learned that using the extract interface methodology for refactoring can be very simple and very straightforward, and introduces very little chance of error, because although I added the new interface to my service class, I only switched to the interface in the scenario or in the places I wanted to use it. So all the other places in code still use the service concrete, and everybody's happy. So I hope you learned something. Until next time.